All right.
Hey.
Hi there. Welcome to our stream. For those of you who don't already know, we're Revolution Software, an indie dev studio founded in 1990.
Hey.
We're based in the English city of York, and you might as well know from our stream. such games as Beneath the Steel For Sky those of and you the who don't infamous already Broken know,
Oh,
Sword series. we're We really Revolution love making Software, games.
an
Indie dev studio founded right
in
now, we're working
1990.
on
Hey.
Beyond
We're
the
based
Steel
in the English
Sky,
city
the
of
long-awaited
and you might as well know
revival of the Beneath the Steel Sky series from 26 years ago now. And it's coming to Apple Arcade and Steam very, very soon. So stay tuned for that release date. But enough about the studio. We're going to hear today from Charles, Cecil, and Dave Gibbons, and get down and geeky and talking about concept art and the making of Beneath the Steel Sky and their beautiful friendship leading up to the new game. So why don't we introduce ourselves?
Oh, shall I go first, Dave? Because you're much more important than me.
Sure.
I'm Charles. I'm the founder and the CEO of Revolution. I'm the game director of Beyond the Steel Sky, and it's going to be. I love talking to Dave. We were actually. I was just thinking what fun it was in New York when we were there in September, October,
Yeah.
and just it's always fun. So that's me, Dave.
I'm Dave Gibbons. I'm, let's say, art director of Beyond the Steel Sky and a long-time beautiful friend of Charles's.
the good-looking side.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm Wendy. I'm the communications manager of Revolution Software, and I'm the latest addition to the team. All right, let's start with the basics. So, Dave, your reputation actually precedes you a little bit. So, for people who might not know or not be able to place you, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I've been writing and drawing comic books for many, many years, since the 70s. And I've worked on all kinds of things: Superman, Green Lantern, Doctor Who, 2000 AD, which I co-created with Trooper and drew Dan Dare. But I suppose I'm best known for my collaboration with Watchmen, which was a graphic novel, which is still on sale to this very has spawned a movie and a really good TV series. So that's kind of where you might know me from.
Awesome. And what about you, Charles?
I'm probably best known for Revolution. I have had the absolute privilege of writing games since 1981. My first game was for the Sinclair ZX81 in 1981. We had 1K of memory. I love doing this, and I know that it's very obvious, but this phone has got 64 million times as much memory as we had back in those days. But what really was exciting about it was that at the time, and bearing in mind this was like 40 years ago, the ZX81 had the same memory and about the same processing power as the computers that landed Apollo 11 on the moon. So we thought that we were rocket scientists when we started typing away in BASIC and in machine code.
Well, that's very fair. Okay, so let's move on. I see in our little script here that you have quite the past together as well.
I didn't think we were going to talk about that, Charles.
Wasn't that in the contract, Dave? That was off limits.
That's all part of the beautiful friendship. We won't talk anymore about it. No, we go back. Charles is much better than dates. Was it the late 80s or the early 90s? Late 80s, imagine.
Yeah.
And I've got a vague memory to meet Charles when I believe that you worked for Activision, was it?
I was, yes. I was working for I was head of development for Activision from about 1988 to about 1990. Yes, that's when we first spoke.
And Charles had seen my work in Watchmen and kind of made the connection that if I could design a world like that for a comic book, I could design a world for a video game as well. And I was quite excited by that because my son was a huge video game player and I was kind of interested myself. Anyway, nothing came of it at Activision, and Charles went away and formed his own company, Revolution, and invited me again to help them prepare a game that they had in mind. And the thing that I really loved about the off was the collaboration of Charles, as he does now, had a great creative and technical team around him, and I just really fell into the joy of collaboration, which has always been the most attractive comics. So in many ways, my generation sat in their bedrooms and drew their own comics and hoped to become a professional comic book artists. Charles's generation, the ones after that, played games in their bedroom, hoping that they could one day work for own a games company. So there are many parallels there.
Sorry, you all stopped so abruptly talking. I wasn't sure if it was audio. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty cool retrospective on that. It's hard for, I mean, I was born in 1992. It's kind of hard for me to imagine what it is like making a studio around the time that I was born, which is kind of crazy.
Obviously, I mean, you take for granted the incredible technology that we have now. The way that we communicated in those days was to actually send things through fax, and a fax for young people was like it sent data through the telephone, and this, you know, and it gave a fairly bad representation, and it would come out, and that was pretty good. But then we'd send data through a modem, and the modem, you'd actually have to phone up the person at the other end, agree all of the technical. It almost certainly wouldn't work. It would take you about 3/4 of an hour to get everything working, and then it would run at 56K. So, you know, we've got a 1 gig line out here. It's 20,000 times faster than what we did then. And it's just unthinkable how it's all changed.
And I'll never forget the little dial-up noise you used to get as it connected, and that future. I don't. The little beep 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 beep.
I mean,
it was the same. There was the same with the ZX81 or a Spectrum, where it was on cassette and it was the data. And shall I tell you something that's actually quite interesting? That's got nothing to do with this conversation whatsoever. And that is that basically, obviously, it's a square wave for zeros and ones, and all the rich kids had these cassette players. And what nobody realized at the time was that it automatically tried to make the sound better, and it would round off the square waves. So all the poorest kids had really terrible cassette players, which worked perfectly, and all the rich kids could never get their games to work. So it was like an inverse logic in terms of, you know, anyway, I'll keep quiet now.
No, yeah. Can you tell us a bit more, Grandad?
I mean, it sounds really sad, and I don't want to shit on my country, but I come from Austria, where doctors still use faxes. And whenever,
really?
Yeah. Oh. And some doctors' offices don't have separate fax lines, so they yell across the ordinations or the little places to sit in, "Don't pick up, this is a fax," because if you pick it up, it sounds corrupted.
Yeah. Well, but having said that, faxes were great, because the way that we worked was that Dave used to, we'd send him the design, send him ideas, and then Dave would actually draw, and we'd go backwards and forwards, sending this backwards, because what would have happened before the fax is we'd have had to go to the post, and we'd have gone backwards and forwards, or we could have got together. But it was actually a very efficient way of working, and Dave would draw all the backgrounds. We'd agree that they fulfilled the functionality. And then they'd be sent to an artist called Les Pace, who would actually paint them. What we were aiming for was a sort of interactive comic book look, which I'm not quite sure we achieved, but we did get a really unique look in that hand-drawn paint, also the painting. And we had a very, very experienced team of particularly, you know, on the animation front, somebody called Steve Oates, who we'd picked up for our previous game, which was called Year of the Temptress. And Steve was able to animate absolutely brilliantly, because we had a limit on Amiga of 32 colors. So it was an incredible skill using those 32 colors as effectively as possible, both for the backgrounds and for the characters as well.
Yeah, so it did give it a really interesting look. It almost a bit like a traditional animated film, with that kind of hand-painted background texture. But the thing that I enjoyed about the sprites, which I actually made some of them myself after looking over your guys' shoulder, was I sat on an old Amiga computer and literally assembled this pixel by pixel, because not only was there a limit on the colors, there was a limit of pixels that each little sprite could be. So I'd have to change the color of one of the pixels and then go and stand over the other side of the square to see whether it worked with the other colors. So it was a really unusual. I always liked to challenge, and of course by the time I more or less mastered it, it became redundant anyway. But it was a really interesting.
But the interesting thing, Dave, is that the style, I mean, everyone looks at the style, but the style was very much dictated by the incredible constraints that we had. You know, the fact that there were so few colors, so those colors needed to be shared. And that was per screen. So on each screen, there was a thematic color palette. When you were inside, if you remember when you drew the press room, which had a blue feeling to it, and the constraint came from the fact that we had so few colors, but it meant that it had a really powerful color palette that created that sort of blue mood. When you went outside, it was all about the red of the flames and the rust.
Yeah, well, I suppose again it's a question of a limitation in a way. Being a creative opportunity, it gives you a chance to use a different skill. But the thing I remember about these sprites as well was when I drew the backgrounds, it really helped to have four objects, because the thing the sprites couldn't was to go backwards and forwards in Z or Z space, so they couldn't change size unless you walked them behind a foreground object and then change the size and have to walk out the other side. So you had to do these really inventive kind of sleights of hand to make the whole thing look more convincing. But what we did do, and it's the thing we've carried forward into Beyond a Steel Sky as well, we had an introductory comic book which I drew and which I've drawn for Beyond a Steel Sky as well. And that meant that we could do really high resolution, really exciting versions of the little sprite characters, with the hope that when you looked at the blocky little sprite, you would see the one rendered full color, you know, outline rendered thing that I'd drawn in the comic book. And what we've done in Beyond a Steel Sky is we've actually used the characters exactly from the game to appear in the comic book. So this time it's got a completely seamless feel, which works well, I think. But there was something about that original way we did it which felt really creative, because it was literally flying back and using every bit of tomfoolery we could to sell it.
And Dave, we have, I don't know about you, but I have very fond memories of where Revolution was founded, which was in the English eastern seaside port of Hull, which is a very fine and a great city. Although
I couldn't resist calling my journeys there going to Hull back, but I think it's the name does invite that. But no, Hull is a great city, and it's we're now in York, which is I guess the county town of the Yorkshire counties around it. But Hull is a great city. And Dave, you used to come up on a fairly regular basis, didn't you? And what were your great memories? What were the things that you remember from this epic journey from London to Hull? Well, I used to come up, I think maybe every couple of weeks, and I'd get a big fast train from London up to Doncaster, which is a huge railway interchange, and then I'd have to wait for the little local shuttle, which was like two kind of cattle trucks, and that would jerk its way along the track to. And then as I remember, it was only a short from the station to where you worked. But the real attraction of it for me was that underneath Charles's studio, there was an amusement arcade full of fruit machines, one-armed bandits, and they used to do the most wonderful bacon butties. Now, for anybody who doesn't speak our language, a bacon butty is like a hamburger roll with a piece of bacon in it, or a piece of bread with bacon in it. Butty means sandwich, basically. So the first thing that would happen when I arrived at Revolution offices, with Charles would go down and bring me the most beautiful bacon sandwich, and fortified by that, it away, and we were able indeed to make magic, all powered by bacon.
In fact, not only did they do bacon butties, they also did chip butties as well. Now, chip butties sound like a dreadful, dreadful invention, but they're actually really nice. And for those who are not, don't understand what this all means, it's basically just a sort of gooey bap with cheap margarine and chips. And it sounds like it should be disgusting, but actually it tastes really nice. I mean, I haven't had one for years and years and years, but they are great, aren't they?
Well, I'll give you another sandwich suggestion, and you won't believe this. toast sandwich, a piece of toast in between 2 buttered slices of bread served hot. It's a revelation. You can almost think it's crispy. Try it. You'll be amazed.
What?
Wow.
That's cookery tips over.
Wow. That's great. Do you know what? I mean, that's fantastic, Dave.
Thanks,
I know what's for dinner tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to go and get one now while you're talking.
Just circling back to the chip butty. Remember that chips aren't crisps. Chips are fries.
Of course they are.
Yes, they are. French fries.
Because else it sounds a little bit more crispy.
In all the civilized parts of the world, that's exactly what a chip is, yeah.
I see where you're
But as well as that, what was great was that also, because the sprites were so limited, the memory was so limited, the team was really small as well, wasn't it? So we had maybe 6 or 7 people, and everybody knew exactly what was going on. We had the equivalent of a network, a computer network, and that was Tony Warrener would save something to a disk, and then he'd throw it across the room to Dave Sykes. They were the 2 programmers and the founder, actually two of the founders of Revolution as well. Dave would collect it, put it in, and copy it across. And that was what a network was back in those days, a Frisbee disk that went backwards and forwards across the office. So there you go.
Happy days.
A lot of studios still have golden discs that they show off at releases. I think most famously Kojima Productions did that, like huge studio selfie with the disc.
Oh, no. I'm talking about something completely different. I'm talking about the fact that when data wanted to be transferred from one program to another, they saved it onto a floppy disk, threw it across the room, caught it, stuck it in the disk drive, copied the information backwards and forwards, and then threw the disk. So that was our networking system.
Right, that's what you mean. Wow, yeah, that's vintage.
That's old. Yeah.
I already have a pretty interesting question in the chat, and I don't want to jump the gun here, but here's one from Worms T17 saying, questions for Dave Gibbons. What is it like redrawing characters or places you did for Steel Sky, and now reimagining them in a today's world?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the few constants is Foster himself, Hero, our protagonist. So I was very much able to draw him in the style of the original comic book. Change his clothes around a bit because we figured in all the time passed in that world between the 2 games, he would change the way he was a bit, but he was still recognisably. Joey again was pretty much the same, although he'd really existed as a couple of panels comic book and a blocky little sprite about 1/4 of an inch across. So, but then as far as the city was concerned, we'd only really glimpsed parts of the city before. We'd never got a proper outside view of it, or actually been able to see vertically the relationship between the different levels in 3-dimensional space. So it's a question of taking what we'd originally established and kind of bringing it to life, imagining it in 3D rather as a flat drawing. And again, I was really helped in that by Charles's team at Revolution, who would take my pencil sketches, which were, they had all the detail you needed. They were basically just outline pencil drawings, and then would add detail to them and then model them as 3-dimensional objects. So it was wonderful to see the evolution from sprites and rough background drawings through my more advanced sketches, through more advanced drawings, and finally to things that really seemed. And the real cherry on the top was one they showed me the game VR headset, and that was just mind-blowing because there were these designs that we worked on and we were actually walking around in the middle of them. So yeah, that's kind of how the evolution of the art went.
All right. So going back to on track of the things that we wanted to talk about, just to keep us going. So we have here noted that you designed a lot of the sprites on D-pad.
D-paint, deluxe paint. Yeah. It was hardly deluxe, but it was sort of okay paint. Yeah, it was a really crude. It was nothing like Photoshop. It was the crudest art package you could imagine when you look back on it. But at the time, it was the best there was available on a consumer device. So it felt like magic, And
I think you did it on the Amiga, didn't you? We lent you an Amiga, and you actually had to create them on the Amiga itself.
Yeah, and it was click click a pixel, click another pixel, click it. It was really slow. It wasn't like I can do now on my Wacom tablet, just draw it and it's immediately digital and you can manipulate it. It was really laborious thing, but it was an introduction to doing graphics on the computer. And most of the things I do now, draw for comic books or what I've done for the game, is done digitally anyway. It's been a complete revolution for people in my line of work. And again, it means I don't even have to walk to the fax machine now. As you know, I just press send, and Charles and the team have immediately got the full color drawings on the table. So, yeah.
I guess what you gain in efficiency, you lose in the scale of what the game is now considered to what it is then.
Yeah. Well, you have a very different structure. I mean, what we did in those days was, because we had a publisher, we had to define exactly what we were going to deliver by the end. We have the huge privilege of being able to actually develop this ourselves, and our producer Tobias keeps a close control of, because there are so many people and there are so many moving parts and there are people all over the world. We need people to manage the process much more than was ever the case before. But that's wonderful as well, because you have so many voices, such a sort of diverse range of voices with new ideas, and they all, hopefully make the game feel a lot richer than just a small group of people writing a game in Hull.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got another interesting question. So, what did you both find hardest returning to the BAS world after such a long time away from it?
Wow.
Thanks to Dreams of Sheems.
I don't know that I found anything hard about it. I mean, we had kind of planned that we would one day return to it. And I unearthed a possible script for a sequel, which had quite a different feel to it than the game that we've eventually done, Beyond the Steel Sky. But I was very aware of how well the game had been received. And not just because of my artwork, because it was a really good game to play. And I'd always thought, it would be nice as a change of pace to do another one and to use modern technology on it and to go back and see Charles and his team. And indeed, it was the same spirit, the same sense of collaboration, a slightly bigger team, but still a kind of joyous thing to do. And something that, I'm not saying I will, but I might even return to it again. Who can tell? Because we've assembled what I think is a really interesting world. I think it's not quite like any other adventure games world, and we've now got the whole thing set, so there's anything we
it is so interesting. Oh, sorry. It is so interesting to say that it's unique, because I think what you created with Beyond the Steel Sky was something that never existed before, ever in the world of gaming. And it's hard because gaming has evolved since then. Like, it's so much more accessible to make games. It's so much more diverse to make games. How have we clinged on to the uniqueness making Beyond the Steel Sky? How did we translate that into a modern gaming experience while still embracing its origins?
Could I just say one thing on the subject of the way it looks? What we wanted to do this time was to make it look like a moving comic book, and so the technical guys went to a lot of trouble to figure out, write their own toon render that put an outline around objects, but just enough of an outline to make them look drawn. And I actually greatly prefer that to something that's attempting to be photorealistic, because I think the minute you add a kind of piece of artistic style to it, it immediately creates interest. So I think that's added to the uniqueness of the game that we've got. It also makes it seamless from the printed comic book into the animated game. So it's been a really interesting experience. Content.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, one of the things, obviously, as Dave says, is that we wanted to make it slightly later, and we wanted the game to feel familiar for people who haven't played the original, but then utterly accessible to people. Familiar to people who have played the original, but utterly accessible to people who haven't, so they don't need to have done. So really what we wanted was a juggling act where enough time had passed that actually the world was completely new, but it brought forward a few things. And that familiarity, though, couldn't be writing the same story again. And clearly, the first game was about a dystopia, and Foster and Joey resolved that by defeating Link. So it's what would have happened in the meantime, and what would have happened under the Joey version of Union City, and how would it have turned out, given that Joey was and is Foster's best friend. So the idea is, what is this utopia that Joey would have created, and that is the world that Foster comes into.
Yeah. And I think that's the other interesting thing as well, that quite a lot of time has elapsed between the original game and the new game, so things have changed. It isn't like we've gone back to the next week and seen the next adventure. The time that's passed, as it has in the real world, is an integral part of the story and of the way everything appears.
Yeah, and I mean, there has been quite some discussion about this on Twitter as well, where people ask, like, do I have to play Beneath the Steel Sky in order to play Beyond the Steel Sky?
Absolutely not. Absolutely
and the
not.
answer is, if you have played Beneath the Steel Sky, which is, by the way, free on GOG for everyone. If you have played it, then you're going to return to a world of, you know, like hidden things coming full circle, nostalgia. But if you have never played the game and it's just not for you because you can't immerse in that kind of art style, or it's just not the kind of game you would play anymore, then you are in for a world of surprise and mystery. And I think that's really good. Like, I came to this team as somebody who had never played Beneath the Steel Sky, and I started playing Beyond, and I was amazed by the game. It was so beautiful. It has such a beautiful, vivid world. And I didn't feel like I was missing out anything by not having played Beneath the Steel Sky, which I will still pick up once the workload gets a little less. But yeah, that means that I think it's super accessible. If that's
that's lovely to hear. I mean, the other thing, of course, was the gameplay, and what we wanted. The vision for the game is that it's very much an adventure. But whereas most adventures, and historically adventures, are very much in a static world, and you walk up and there's a character doing a loop, and then you do something, and everything is predetermined. So you're effectively looking into the mind of the game designer to try and work out, you know, what that person intended you to do. And what we wanted to do was kind of transcend that by still having the idea that you walk and you interact and you move around the environment, but actually have more base. And we do that through a system that actually we bring forward from our very early days, which is called virtual theatre. And the idea of virtual theatre is that characters walk around the world communicating and responding to the world. And one of the things that we had in the original game was Link, which was the evil AI. And a puzzle that I felt particularly proud of was that you could go into Link and you could actually change the permissions of the factory owner, Gilbert Lamb, who's a Yorkshireman, which I think is very unfair. As a Yorkshire person who's lived here for 30 years, I'm not sure why we still write Yorkshireman in that way, but I guess it comes from the Monty Python days of, you know, whatever that sketch was for Yorkshireman. And so what we allow the player to do is actually hack into the world and change the Internet of Things. And as the world changes, as unexpected things happen, so the characters in that world will respond. And then on top of that, we can write the adventure puzzles that transcend a normal adventure. So we hope that people who love point-and-click adventure games will love this game as well. But people who want something a little bit more dynamic, it'll appeal to them as well, because we've got characters that you can subvert through the way that you interact with the world, and it'll allow you to then have multiple solutions. It'll allow you to have a much more dynamic. And the other thing I felt that we should be able to achieve, and hopefully we have, is that in this world there isn't an obscure solution. The solution emerges from exploring the environment. And so by exploring the environment, you can find out more and more about what's happening in that world, and that hopefully will help you then solve the puzzle.
Sorry, great. So let's circle back to a really interesting question, which is, what made you decide to work on a sequel after 26 years now?
Well, I suppose it's a long time for a second date, but I think I certainly enjoyed it, and I think it made Beneath the Steel Sky fresh. My input, although I can take no credit at all for the gameplay, which I'm told by people who know about gameplay is great. So I was aware that I was working with a team, really knew what they were doing, and who I'd become friends with. I mean, I worked on the game. We bumped into each other over the years several times. I'd helped with some of the other games that the guys repurposed for the iPhone, so on. So we were kind of in touch, and it's been like going back to meet old friends and spend time. As I say, that's what I was the collaboration, and that's what I increasingly look for, is a creative experience where I'm going to have fun, and I've certainly had fun both.
I mean, the other point, which I think is quite relevant, is that the adventure commercially was doing really well through to the mid 90s, and then it began to decline. And by the end of the 90s, the publishers were saying two things. They were saying the PC as a format was dead, and they were saying that adventures were even deader. So actually, there was very little opportunity to write a sequel, because when games needed to be published by publishers and they needed to go into retail, you had to have the support of both, which Adventures didn't. And what actually happened in around about 2008 was that we weren't writing Adventures anymore. And Apple released the iPhone and actually got in contact with us and asked us if we'd write the game, bring our games to their platform, which is very new. And they felt that there was so much that could be done with the iPhone and the touchscreen, and Adventures would be the perfect platform. And we were really flattered and thrilled when they did. So we actually brought Beneath the Steel Sky across to iPhone, and then Broken Sword. And the games did really well, and they went out to a new audience. That was really exciting as well. I mean, on one particular, for Broken Sword, we were part of something called the 12 Days of Christmas, which is just a European initiative. And we had 2.5 million downloads in one day, which just blew our minds. And it showed that the world showed the world was changing so profoundly. And everything that people had learned from a publishing and from a marketing and from a sales perspective was out of the window, and everything was starting again. And that was the world into which we started to develop Broken Sword 5, and we successfully launched a Kickstarter campaign. And it just felt like actually we had a really good solid base of fans for Beneath the Steel Sky, and the time felt right, both from a creative perspective but also from a commercial perspective. We could actually develop it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I have a note here that says Norrin and I drove to meet you and Helen.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right. And that was probably 3 yeyears ago. And and Dave had sent over, as he said earlier, sorry to repeat, but a script that he'd written in 1995, a year after we'd released Beneath the Steel Sky. And we just went, Norrin, who was also one of the founders, and I drove down to meet with Dave and Helen, and just really explore whether it would work. And we came out with it. Came out after this meeting. It was there was a lot of enthusiasm, and it was let's do it. And that's really what everything was built on.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't go with the story that I wrote way back then, but that had explored some new avenues and put us on the path to explore ways that it might be done. It'll be interesting one day, and if they ever do a book of the creation of Beyond the Steel Sky, it'd be really interesting to that script there. Then people could see what might have. That's the kind of stuff that fascinates me. But yes, as Charles said, it was just great to renew our friendship, both our real world friendship and the creative friendship that we'd had together. I'm really happy to be here now talking.
I mean, the other thing, of course, is that our CTO, Joost Peters, came to work at Revolution on, I think, as an intern just for a week or two when he was at university. And he was a huge Beneath the Steel Sky fan. And he never left. We still have him, and it's great. He's wonderful. But the interesting thing is that Beneath the Steel Sky was originally written for MS-DOS, so and the Amiga, the two formats. And MS-DOS was supported by Windows 95, which before Windows 95, I think it was all DOS. And then Windows 98 had a DOS emulator. But after Windows 98, Windows no longer supported DOS at all. So from our perspective, the game was effectively dead because nobody could play it. And this wonderful group of people who call themselves ScumVM, who are basically a group of students around the world, took it upon themselves to write an operating system, ScumVM, which then they would convert the games, the adventure games, to run on their system. And there were two programs. There was Joost, who was in the Netherlands, and a German fellow called Robert Groffingham, who was in Germany, as far as I understand. And the two of them came together, and we gave them the source code, and they worked away to convert it. And it was a passion project for them. But what they actually did was meant that the game could be played, and it can be played to this day, because every time you get new systems, they update ScumVM, and you've got this basic code which runs on all of these systems. So we owe all of those people at ScumVM a huge debt of gratitude, because without that, the game would effectively be dead.
And of course, you can play those old low-resolution images on a high-resolution screen, and it looks perhaps a bit blocky. But when you shrink it down to an iPhone or an iPad screen, it looks great. It looks actually better than it ever looked in its heyday, because everything becomes sharp. And the fact you've got touchscreen technology means that it's easy puzzles and the path through the game. So it's really interesting how the improvement in technology stimulates new creativity, and arguably without that technology improvement, we wouldn't be here now doing this game.
No, that's a really good point. Certainly, I remember throwing away so many digital assets because we absolutely knew that there was no way that any of them would be needed. So, because under the old system of retail, you did new games, and then you moved on to the next thing. The ability to come back in this digital marketplace and reinvent the game was absolutely incredible. But we were very lucky. To go back to Apple again for a moment, because when we brought the Beneath the Steel Sky across, the resolution, which was through 2200, was actually the resolution of the iPhone. So it actually looked really good, because the iPhone resolution was pretty low at that time. And then the next generation of iPhone came out, and it was 640, 480 or whatever. It was around about that, and that happened to be what Broken Sword was. So each time we rode the wave, and by extraordinary serendipity, the assets that we had happened to be in the resolution that fitted each generation of iPhone, until Broken Sword 5, which was Retina, we were able to do a double HD. We were very lucky in that regard.
So that relationship with Apple, this is one of the core reasons why we're so heavy on supporting Apple Arcade, right?
Oh yeah,
very much so. Effectively, back in 2007-8, the model just did not work for independent developers. We were writing games that publishers were making millions of dollars on, and we were losing money because we were having to fund part of it. And I remember sitting down with Noreen going, "Well, what do we do? What do we do?" And I actually did quite a lot of consultancy, because we couldn't write any games because it made no sense. And so that's why that approach from Apple in 2008 just changed everything. And they supported us. And our contact at Apple was a lovely fellow called David Currell, who sadly passed away a year ago or so. But he was incredibly passionate about independent developers. And for the UK and the European developers, he really supported them in making sure that the games that he thought the App Store editorial team should know about did get to know about. And they gave us a lot of support. And so we're very grateful to Apple for their support in those early days. And now it's come to the fact that this is now an Apple Arcade title. And Apple Arcade is absolutely brilliant. One of the things that's happened in the past decade or so is that the market has moved away, particularly on mobile, from premium games to free-to-play. And there was this real sense that free-to-play would absolutely engulf us and swamp us. So what Apple Arcade allows people to do is, by paying, a subscription that's currently $4.99 a month, probably £4.99, I don't remember. It means that all of those people that would have been playing free-to-play can now experience our game. Now, I think that 95% of the market was free-to-play. So, and we were selling games at £5, £6, £7, £10. And that means that, many tens, if not 100 times as many people are able to play the game because they'll be part of the Apple Arcade, which is just really, really exciting, because there's always a sense that only a tiny proportion of people who actually would have enjoyed the game would ever have actually had the opportunity to play it.
I was really thrilled, being a huge Apple geek myself, my iPad Pro, my phone, monitor, and I always watch the Apple events, and Tim Cook said, and now introducing, oh great, and the first thing that popped up was Charles's talking head. First words out of his mouth was, working with legendary comic artist Dave Gibbons. And I thought, yes.
Made it.
And I mean, having them behind us has obviously made a huge difference to the way that we can produce the game and promote the game as well. So that feels really good.
They've been a fantastic partner. They basically said, how can our partnership with you make you more ambitious than you could have been otherwise? And they made it clear that, that they didn't want it to be an exclusive to Apple Arcade. We could publish it on other formats as well. So it's been, they have been extraordinary. But the thing about Apple is, when we did, as I mentioned earlier, our 12 Days of Christmas, the person who was our main contact at Apple was really excited. I remember him sending through emails, Broken Sword is in the top 10 most tweeted keywords in the world, and all this information. And there was this extraordinary Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the most successful companies in the world, and a small developer. And it was all about the partnership. And they are, I think they value this sort of the relationship they have with so many independent developers. And it just works really well. I hope from their perspective it's symbiotic, because the fact that they're working with indie developers, I hope makes their platform feel more vibrant. And certainly from our perspective, it's a wonderful relationship.
Yeah, so we have gotten a lot of questions whether or not Beyond the Steel Sky, sorry, now I'm getting confused. Beyond the Steel Sky was a mobile game or a PC game. And just to clear it up completely, while traditionally Beyond the Steel Sky would have been viewed as a classic PC game experience, the great thing about Apple Arcade is you can choose how you enjoy it. Like, if you want to lie on the couch and play it on your phone, you can do that. If you want to have a dedicated device like an Apple TV, you can do that. If you want it on a Mac sitting up really straight with your nice chair, you can do that. And that's something that I really like about those streaming services, is just the flexibility they add. And of course, the regular Steam gamers like me can just play it as we've always have. So it really added a lot of value, I feel, to have this platform amongst them.
It is, and it is very much both. It's both a PC stroke Mac game and a mobile game as well, and so we've worked really hard to absolutely maximize the quality across every single format, and that's something that's really been our focus for the last few months.
Dave is getting darker as the time passes. As the sun
getting darker. Hold on. Let there be light.
Oh, nice. We have Dave back.
Thank you.
Wow.
Perfect. Oh, look at that. That's really good lighting.
It's daylight. Remember daylight?
I've not been outside
So we
since
used
March.
to have in the old days, wasn't it, Charles? Daylight.
It was.
It
was. You were lucky. You were lucky.
Aye.
Let's circle back a little bit to your friendship. So, what was it back then? What is it now? How would you describe you two? How often do you hang out? How did it start?
Well, Charles is very hospitable. Charles is now. I don't go on the rickety old train up. I come on the really nice train direct to York, and I stay in the Grand, which is a very nice hotel. And Charles and Noreen always take me, and if it's with me, really nice slap up meal and a lovely breakfast the next day. And so we're very looked after. We did, when we reached one milestone with Revolution, I'm blanking on, was you actually go jolly at Castle Howard. We had an absolute feast and drank much more than we really should have. So it's great. Yeah, I mean, it's like working with friends. It's great.
The Castle Howard was great. That was actually for Broken Sword 1, I think, and we were so thrilled because through sales on iPhone, we were able to, we found ourselves being successful again. And what was particularly nice was that for those who don't know Castle Howard, if anybody, and I know it's a really old series from the 80s, but there's the adaptation of Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited was actually filmed in Castle Howard, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. But it was really special, wasn't it? Because we got a team together, got the whole team together, and there were Canalettos, there was John the Baptist, there was extraordinary original artwork, and we kind of had the whole place to ourselves, didn't we? It was wonderful.
And I must tell you that the catering was so sumptuous that we thought that we were getting were the snacks with the drinks, and then we found out that we didn't have huge snacks, but we had a course meal waiting for us. So it was a great night out, and hopefully when we reach the successful conclusion and circumstances allow, we'll have to do something like that again.
But Dave, what I was going to say is, I mean, we as I said earlier, but just to go back to New York Comic Con, where we were presenting to US press, that was great, wasn't it? And Kira came along and it was fantastic. But what I remember about that was wandering around, and there were huge billboards for Watchmen. And you must have been so proud. I was proud standing with you. You must have been as proud as anything, seeing this, your creation there, all over the place.
Oh yeah, there was a huge hoarding at Times Square. It was going past on the buses. There was opposite the Comic Con. There was a huge display as well. I remember just a brief anecdote. I remember days when they were came in the car one day, and the guy asked me what I did. Was I in the movie business? I said, no, I'm in the comic. He said, oh, great. What's it called? I said, Watchmen. He said, I haven't heard of it. He said, could you draw me one of the characters? And I said, okay. So I sat in the back of the car, and on his timesheet, I drew Rorschach, okay? And I handed it back to him, and it's basically a guy with a mask on. And he kind of looked at it and went, right, okay. I said, you will get it one day. And he looked up, and as he looked up, a New York City bus went by, and on the side of it, it said Watchmen with a huge photo of Rorschach. And he said, now I get it. So, so, I mean, I love New York as a town. The Comic Con is just fantastic. And yeah, it was great to see.
Wow.
And we have just as much. So Gamescom is amazing, because Gamescom is about the equivalent, where you have hundreds of thousands of mainly German but really passionate gamers who kind of descend on the place. And I mean, it's like Comic Con. It's this incredible enthusiasm. People in cosplay. It's just great. It's wonderful to be able to mix both with really passionate fans, and then to be able to talk to press and do business and all of these things all in one place.
Well, what's really fantastic about shows like this, but by the nature of the work, we spend a lot of time sat in rooms working by ourselves on stuff, wondering if people are ever going to like it. When you get to shows like that, you actually meet consumers, you meet the people who live and die for this stuff, which is tremendously energizing. And to think that, that's that thing that I've spent those lonely hours doing now is out in the world, and it actually means something. So I always come away very energized. And it's the same for games, comics as well. And the whole cosplay thing is an absolute revelation. That's taken off amazingly. And that is the height of passion, to actually make the costume of your favorite character and walk around in it. And some of them don't look that comfortable, so I do take my to the cosplay thing. It's always a thrill.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I mean, I've never been with you guys because I joined this team during a lockdown. But I love conventions like Gamescom and EGX. Like, I mean, Gamescom is crazy because it literally takes you 20 minutes to go from one hall to the other just due to people. And the sheer size of it, like, insane. But yeah, it's really nice to be able to just connect on this human level, because if you see, like, I don't know, if you have 1,000 downloads of your game on Steam, you are seen as a not successful indie game. But if 1,000 games come, like if 1,000 people who played your game come to your booth and say, I played your game, that's so many people. Like, we lose ourselves in these numbers a lot. So it's really nice to get back to that and see, like, wow, I've made an impact on human lives, which you can have over decades.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember when I was much younger, when I was a comics fan, I maybe only knew 2 comics fans, but then you go to San Diego, you go to, and there's 150,000, 200,000 people, and you think, I found my nation. These are my people. This is where they are. Right? So yeah, it was great. Whether you're a professional or whatever, it's always it makes things very, very real, and just, well, for me, renews my enthusiasm.
Do you remember the launch that we did at the Apple Store?
I think I do. Yes.
That was incredible, because one of the things that when I first started writing games, we got to meet the people who are our fans, who loved our games back in the early 80s. And then retail, publisher, the relationship changed completely. So ultimately, our relationship was with the publisher. The publisher's relationship was with the retailer, and then the retailers was with the gamer. So we were we were way away from the direct relationship. And what happened when we started publishing on the App Store, or iTunes as it was then, was that we then organized launch events. We had no idea if anybody would come to them. And I remember being really worried. I talked to the Apple guys at the Apple Store in London, Regent Street. And they said, I remember them saying, yeah, well, we could probably fit you in. We've got Robbie Williams next week. We've got the cast of the Vampire Diaries in 3 weeks' time. But, yeah, we can probably get you in 2 weeks' time. And I was really worried that nobody was going to turn up. And then, I mean, what happened was that there was queues and queues and queues of people. And it was just incredible. And this was the first time we actually got to meet people who played our games. Before then, the only way that we knew what people thought was through the magazines. Mm-hmm. And that was great, but it wasn't the direct relationship, and it was incredible. So you were there, I promise you, and we had a few other people as well, and it was just an amazing, joyous event.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Man. And I think it's good to round up here and say, like, thank you to everyone who has ever played any of our games, who will play. Yeah. And to those. Sorry, go on. And to those who will support Beyond the Steel Sky, because obviously as a studio, it's really important that every game we make is successful, because else we can't focus on other games we potentially might do in the future. Hint, hint, notch, notch. More I won't say about that. But so we have a little treat for everyone at the end. We asked you to write Foster diary entries, and some of you really came through with some strong contestants here. So the idea was to make a pretend Foster diary within 300 words or less. And I think I sent you to the props that we've gotten. So who wants to start?
Well, why don't I start? Because I want to have a big shout out to Leonard Chalice, who entered. Leonard, actually, I recognise because he came when we were reaching the end of Broken Sword 5. He came in and helped us test it and gave us really valuable feedback. And I'm very grateful still. I remember all of these people. And Leonard, thank you so much for that. So if Dave, if you're happy, why don't I kick off?
Sure. Warm them up.
So Leonard's entry is, and I haven't actually practiced this, so forgive me because I am going to stumble. It pains me to admit it, but being out here on my own is a relief. I love my people, but having the time to think, the only sound being the quiet shuffle of my own 2 feet, needing to answer only my own unanswered questions, is almost therapeutic. Some things are hard to push out of your mind, but time is a wonderful healer. That and Gap Moonshine. I was naive to think I'd never have to revisit my memories and experience of Union City, let alone visit it. But that's where I'm heading. Hang on, he knows all about this story. You know all that, Leonard? Anyway, a reunion with a city could have been nostalgic, maybe even fun, but I could never really bring myself to going back. I suppose I didn't really need to. Besides, I lead these people now, good people. They cling to my actions as much as my words, looking for leadership and answers. I have to be there for them. I have to be there for them, like they were there for me. I guess that makes me the old man now. It certainly feels that way. I don't remember my feet aching this much the last time I was on the outskirts of a city. Either way, my hand has been forced, and something doesn't feel right. The look on my mother's face was enough to bring it all back. Is that how my mother looked moments before that fateful crash? I have to reunite mother and child. It outweighs everything. Was I ever at peace the last time I left the city? Or had I just convinced myself that? Maybe I'm about to open up a whole new can of worms. I can see a huge sign on the horizon welcoming me. For better or worse, I feel like this is the start of a new adventure. Brilliant, brilliant.
That's
Leonard,
amazing.
what a star you are. Dave, do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, I don't have a note of who this is from, but whoever it is from.
It's from Shady Marmalade.
Shady Marmalade via Discord. Thanks so much.
Hi, Shady. Thanks very much. I will read it as best I can. So this is Foster Diary number 87. Dear Diary, someone once said no man ever steps into the same river. I know there's more to the saying, but that's all me. I don't know who was meant to have said it originally. I can't even think who told it to me. I just remember their words on a distant cold night while the campfire crackled. The words come back to me in dreams now. Always the same dream. Me standing at the edge of a dazzling, impossibly tall city made of glass, stretching above me into the clouds. I try to see the top, but the sun's glare hurts my eye. I know I have to enter the city. In the middle of the wasteland, there's a flooding river, and I have to somehow cross it. I know I can't swim, and I know the river will sweep me away, but I step into the river at the same end. It suddenly becomes tranquil and still, comforting, familiar. And I hear a voice. It's Joey, and he says, Foster, you need to get up. And I know he's right. No matter how tall and terrifying the glass spires are, I need to climb them, to leave the pleasant stream behind. But I'm scared. And again he says, Foster, get up. What does a robot know of the hearts of men? The fear of the unending ascent, the knowledge of the forsaken warm stream, the get up, Foster, Joey. You pissed the bed again. And he's right. Dear Diary, today I pissed the bed again. Thank you.
Amazing.
That's great, isn't it? That's it. These are incredible.
It's brilliant. Sign him up, Charles.
I will.
Commissions incoming.
The final one is from Michael Mounier via Facebook, and it's diary entry 46551. Dear Diary, Robert here again. I hope you haven't heard enough of me talking about Joey. I really wonder if I'll ever meet the original Joey again. Let's call him version 1. Since I left him connected to the city, I can only guess which version he's been upgraded himself to up until now. Just to make it easier, we'll call him Joey version 2, until we know what he likes to call himself? Would he even have any memory of his version 1 experience? Is his original code there? I would do anything to upload the Joey 1 into another robot, just to have my best friend by my side again. Of course, I'd still love to have the upgraded version 2 as my friend, but he will never be able to follow me around anymore. Maybe he doesn't even remember me. Maybe he's too occupied to even talk to me again. Running a city must be hard. Maybe he'd like my help. I wonder what I could do, though. But there's only one way to find out. Joey, someday we'll meet again. Foster.
Not a joy.
Oh, that was so emotional.
Do you know what? The stories we've written it so much resonates with those three. I mean, you guys are brilliant to take the time to write these, and it means the world to us. And you so got into the idea of actually what the relationship between Foster and Joey is. I think we've had three geniuses offering their entries, and thank you so much for that.
That is very true. Thank you very much. All right, we are coming to the 1 hour mark. It is now 18:02. So I think it's time to say our goodbyes. Let's see if we can end the stream with a little bit more grace than we did last time, for those of you who are returning. Yeah, thank you very, very much for attending. If you have any follow-up questions, tweet us at RevSoft Games on Facebook. Follow us. It's Revolution Software, and it's Revolution_software over on Instagram. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Sorry, there's one other thing, Wendy, that you're going to actually be releasing this, aren't you? You're going to be releasing this.
Yes, this is going to be a VOD.
For anybody who wants to see it back.
Yes, for everybody who wants to watch this specific stream back, we're going to upload the VOD, and we're going to do something special with it. We're going to overlay a lot of the maybe even never before seen concept art, so you actually know what people are talking about and what we're on about when we're talking about like ray tracing or like faxing back and forth concept art. Anyway, thank you very, very much.
Thanks everybody for watching, and thanks Charles. And
well, thank you, Dave. It's great, lovely. It's lovely to speak to you as always.
And thanks to Kira behind the scenes as well.
And join the Discord. We're going to put the link in the chat as soon as we disconnect. Thanks so much for reminding me, Leonard.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a lovely weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.